Hey there, guys. I want to take a quick second to highlight a partner that we've been working with lately, Upgraded Formulas. You can see them at upgradedformulas.com. I have personally been taking their upgraded T formula to support natural testosterone production. I've noticed it after a few months. I've noticed I've had a bit more mental clarity. My rest is a little better, and I'm recovering a bit better from my workouts, which was actually surprising. So I'm able to exercise just a bit more. I love to exercise, so that's a bonus for me. Women can also take this because healthy testosterone levels in women help with fat loss, mental clarity, muscle gain, things like that. And also, the estrogen and testosterone go together hand in hand. If you support one, the other does pretty well as well. So definitely check them out. Also, they do something really great. I want to highlight a hair mineral analysis where you send them a little chunk of your hair, and they will let you know if you're deficient in anything or if you have too much of something like heavy metals in your system. So what this does is this is a great thing to help give you data on your health so that you can make decisions. None of this is a miracle cure. All of it is just information to help you make better decisions around your health and supplementation. All right, so really check them out. They're doing some really great quality. They're seeing some huge results, and I believe they're going to have some clinical studies coming out pretty soon. So check them out, upgradedformulas.com. Use the code ADAM10 to get a 10% discount today. Hey there, guys. Adam Bro here, back at you again with another podcast and YouTube video, hopefully. We're working really hard to kind of build up that community a little bit more. So if you're watching us on YouTube, we would love a little subscribe, maybe a like, leave a comment if you agree, disagree, whatever. We'll talk to you. But today, if we're going to talk a little bit about a subject that is important to me and I've done a little bit of work in, and we're going to talk about insulin resistance and how this affects some of the body and, why it's important. Now, I must say out the gate that I am not a doctor, nor am I an endocrinologist, that I'm not studied necessarily. I'm not credentialed in this. Let me just say that. But I have been in this space for quite a long time, and I'm going to do my best to give you an overview of insulin resistance and why it's important to be aware of your insulin. Obviously, some people will disagree with me. Some people will have differing views. It's totally okay. I have no problem with that. But for those who follow me, my goal here is simply to bring awareness to it and to draw your attention to the fact that this is not something that we can ignore. It's something we have to pay attention to. So hopefully it adds a little bit of insight to you, and that it also maybe spurs a few questions, maybe helps you to make some decisions around your health and how you're eating and how you're exercising to maybe make some positive changes, right? Again, my name is Adam. I focus on helping people in the ministry, particularly, or in the nonprofit space, to get healthy, find their health for the first time, or continue to thrive and, work towards what they believe is what God called them to do, which is to steward their health well. I believe you have a God-given mandate to steward the body He has given you to the best of your ability, regardless of the circumstances. Everybody, all of us are dealt a different hand, and we are in different spaces. So perfection is not the goal. Purpose and pushing forward is the goal, right? So we're going to do our best. That's all we can do. We're going to be faithful to do what we can do, because I think that's the only real virtue that Jesus promises to bless, right? When we stand before Him, we should hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant," right? That's the goal. That's what I want to hear. So I want to be faithful, not only to my family. I want to be faithful in what God has called me to do, but I also want to be faithful to take care of the things He's given me to steward, to take care of. Jesus said, if you can be faithful in a few things, He can give you more things, right? So let's be faithful in this body. Let's be faithful in our minds. Let's be faithful in taking care of the people He's put in our life so that He can continue to bless us and help us move forward, right? The goal is to thrive. So let's talk a little bit about insulin. I'm going to be reading quite a bit, so if you're watching, forgive me, but I want to make sure that I get the information correct. I don't want to try to do it from memory. I do a lot of things from memory, but I want to make sure I get this right, okay? So what is the role of insulin in the body? In simple terms, insulin is a hormone produced by a gland in your body called the pancreas, okay? Or an organ called your pancreas. I think it could be gland or organ. Its main job is to help regulate the amount of sugar or glucose, as it is also known, in your blood and control how the body uses and stores energy. So here's what insulin does. It transports, it clears, and it stores, okay? It transports nutrients like amino acids, sugar. It transports these things to the places they need to go, right? That's why you actually see a little bit of an insulin increase whenever you eat protein, right? Or even a little bit with fat, very slight, because it does transportation. It takes things where they need to go. Okay, so it also clears. It clears sugar from the bloodstream, because sugar in and of itself, like direct in the bloodstream, is somewhat toxic. Okay, so it can actually hurt tissues and cells, because for whatever reason it is cytotoxic. So the body works really hard to clear that and put it away in a safe place so that it can be used later. You have to store it so it can be used later, and that's where most glucose is stored in the liver or in the muscle, primarily 80% in the muscle mass, and then also in the liver. So glucose or sugar uptake is one thing it does, okay? When you eat food, especially carbohydrates, your blood sugar levels rise. Insulin acts like a key that unlocks doors in your cells, allowing glucose to enter and provide energy for your body's functions, okay? So glucose, the blood sugar rises, glucose is increased, insulin is secreted, and it starts to clear it from the bloodstream, and then it starts to take it and put it where it needs to go, where it can safely be stored, right? When insulin opens doors for the cells to take in glucose, fat burning is temporarily offline. That's important, okay? So there's one thing that we need to understand, and this is one reason why obesity and being overweight is such a big deal in the United States especially, is because the way most of us eat is we are chronically elevating our insulin levels. Therefore, we are chronically suppressing our ability to burn fat. When insulin is up, you can't burn fat, right? So this is the issue. So when you're constantly eating, couple that with the standard American diet, which is mostly refined carbohydrates, some processed meats, and seed oils with some vegetables smattered around in there, right? And you do that, you eat this way, it drives chronic hunger, makes you want to eat more often. And then you tend to eat similar foods, which is now you're raising the blood sugar again and again and again throughout the day. So couple poor diet with multiple meals throughout the day, and you stay in a place of storage, not in a place of burning, right? So you're constantly storing, which is why we're getting fatter and fatter. Okay, so insulin also helps with blood sugar control. Insulin helps keep the blood sugar levels from getting too high. After you eat, insulin helps lower the blood sugar by guiding glucose into the cells, like muscle tissue. When your blood sugar is low, your pancreas releases a different hormone called glucagon to raise it, right? Sugar is toxic to the body. That doesn't mean if I eat sugar that I eat is necessarily toxic. Like, yes, in huge amounts, of course. Anything in huge amounts can be toxic. But when people are just like, you hear doctors on there who saying all sugar is just toxic. I mean, yeah, kind of. But, fruit is pretty good for you. Now, only eating fruit, toxic, right? So there's extremes to this, right? So I don't like it when people blanket statement like carbohydrates kill people. no, poor habits and poor eating habits kill people. And what they choose, their method of killing themselves is up to them. It wasn't like just carbohydrates just killed them, You choose your habits, right? So yes, sugar is toxic, which is why it's cytotoxic, meaning it does cause damage to the cells, which is why the body works so hard to clear it and put it where it needs to go. All right? So storage of energy is another thing insulin does. It helps your body to store excess glucose for later use. It converts extra glucose into storage form called glycogen, which is stored in your liver and muscles. This stored energy can be released when needed. All right? When is it needed? It's needed when you exercise, right? So think about it, if you're constantly eating, like a 10-year-old, and you're driving your hunger like crazy, so you're constantly hungry, you're having to eat every 2 to 3 hours, but you're eating poor foods every 2 to 3 hours, and then you're not exercising, you're in a constant state of storage, and you're in a constant state of inflammation. So you're always adding, you're never taking away. So you can't just continue to eat and expect to lose weight, right? Like when people say, hey, like I hear bodybuilders say you need to eat 6 meals a day, but without clarifying that, people take that the wrong way and they think they need to be eating all day to keep their blood sugar stable. Actually, the body keeps blood sugar really stable really well when you eat the right foods and you eat pretty much less throughout the day total, okay? So in essence, if we think about it like this, in essence, insulin acts as like a traffic cop for glucose, ensuring the traffic goes where it's needed for energy or gets stored properly for future use, okay? So like when you go to the gym or you exercise and your muscles start moving, they will, depending on the intensity of the exercise, they will choose to use fatty acids, so stored fat for energy, or it can use glucose or stored carbohydrate for energy, right? So depending on the activity. So think about this traffic cop. Without insulin or with insufficient insulin, as in the case of maybe type 1 diabetic, your blood sugar can become too high because you don't have any insulin to clear it, leading to health problems. Insulin is essential for maintaining stable blood sugar levels and overall energy balance in the body. Insulin is absolutely needed for life, but like most things, too little is not good, which would be a type 1 diabetic, and too much is not good, which would be a type 2 diabetic. Type 1 is a genetic issue where the pancreas cannot make enough insulin to clear sugar well. That's why people end up taking insulin. Say hello to Lulu. This is Lulu, our puppy, right? She's a bit wild, but she's laying down right now. But a type 2 is lifestyle plus genetics issue. Okay, so type 2 is what we're seeing more and more of, and that has more to do with lifestyle choices and some genetic predispositions. And this is where the pancreas is overworking due to problems downstream. Okay, so what is insulin resistance and why is it so bad? Okay, we're hearing a lot about this lately. Insulin resistance is a metabolic condition in which the body's cells, particularly muscle, liver, and fat cells, do not respond effectively to the hormone insulin any longer. As a result, the cells have difficulty taking in glucose or sugar from the bloodstream, leading to elevated blood sugar levels. This condition also often requires the pancreas to produce more insulin to compensate for the reduced cellular response, ultimately contributing to higher insulin levels in the blood. Insulin resistance is a key component to various metabolic disorders, including type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And it can have serious health implications if not managed effectively. All right? So insulin resistance is when we continue to push things up and insulin is constantly being produced by the pancreas, but basically your liver the cells that respond to insulin in your liver and your muscles and in your fat cells start to diminish in their reactivity to insulin, right? But because the blood sugar is still toxic, the pancreas, all it knows to do is push out more insulin, right? So now, not only are you have more blood sugar in there because the insulin is not clearing it, but now you have more insulin as well, right? So we're overdoing it in a lot of different ways, and this leads to metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, and a host of other things, okay? So in keeping with the traffic cop image, insulin resistance is when, due to lifestyle, food choices, etc., we overwhelm the streets with cars and bumper-to-bumper traffic, and the cop has to work overtime. As the cop works harder and harder it becomes increasingly difficult to direct cars to the right place. Eventually, all available avenues are backed up and parking is completely full. This is insulin resistance. The fat cells are full, the muscle is full, and the liver is resisting more storage. Therefore, the traffic piles up. Okay? So now we get traffic jams. Blood sugar stays elevated, which is toxic. The cop, the insulin, and the pancreas continue to work harder and harder and harder because that's all they can do. Okay? As the pancreas and insulin, continue to work harder and harder, the infrastructure for the roads starts to break down due to lack of capacity. Okay? So we're by getting into a situation where we are forcing the body to, through inactivity, poor lifestyle choice, poor sleep habits, chronic stress, lack of activity, exercise, and just poor food choices, usually overconsumption. Food is the one thing that people are like to stress about most, but it's usually a combination of the two. It's usually a combination of poor food choice and overconsumption. The issue is that poor food choice usually leads to overconsumption because poor food choice usually is not filling, all right, and has addictive properties usually. So one enables the other. Usually when you have good food choice, you stay full longer and you don't run into these, you kind of head off some of these issues to begin with. That coupled with activity, exercise, and everything, you basically let your fat stores and your energy stores, like in your muscle and in your liver, insulin stores all the sugar in those places, but then you use it with exercise and movement, and then it restores it. So the cycle works well. What happens here is we're constantly using bad food choices and then bad lifestyle choices, forcing all of our storage area in the muscle, which if you're not exercising, you have less muscle, so less storage. It's full. It can't take on any more glycogen. And then your liver is also full. It's resisting storing more fat. And then your fat cells are saying, hey, we can't take no more, bro. So what's happening here is once that slows down, all the body can do is push harder to try to clear out these toxic things, but we keep shoving them in, right? So what happens is now we create a state of inflammation, right? And the infrastructure starts to break down. Just like the cop analogy, right? If we keep the traffic backed up and it's constant and filled, eventually cars are ramming into buildings and we're just jamming stuff everywhere. And that's what happens exactly. So basically, insulin will start storing fat inside of the muscle, right? This is what you become Wagyu beef, right? And it ain't delicious. Not in you, okay? It's delicious in cows. But you don't want to be Wagyu. You want to have lean, you want to look like venison. You want to look like elk. Like when you cut open elk meat, it is bright red. It is like almost purple. There's no fat. There's no marbling in there. That's healthy. When you cut open a Wagyu, when you cut open Wagyu beef and you see like all that intermuscular marbling, that's technically a sick cow. Okay, technically that's an obese cow. All right. So we are trying really hard to clear the traffic, Your body's trying to clear the traffic so that the infrastructure can continue to work. As we develop insulin resistance, the infrastructure starts to break down, which means it starts here at insulin and with the fat cells and the muscle cells, but then it starts to break. You start getting a downstream effect into other systems of the body, okay? So just remember this. We are sending the cars into this image. Like we are the ones pushing the traffic in through our food choices. We send them through diet choices, lack of adequate sleep, and chronic stress and all these other situations. What conditions come from the breakdown of the system? What conditions will come downstream when this starts to happen? So insulin resistance is the beginning stage. And it doesn't happen when you just get fat. It starts to happen when you become less active and start over-consuming. Okay, this is what happens. Personally, I'm very fit. I work out sometimes 7 days a week, some form of resistance training. I lift weights. I do jujitsu. I run. I love exercising. But even for me, if I started eating, let's say, 300-400 grams of carbohydrates a day, for me, I notice I've had the blood test done. I start to become insulin resistant. I actually get close to pre-diabetic. So that's the genetic component for me. I personally don't handle it as well. So it doesn't matter how fit you are sometimes, you still have to make good choices. So what happens when things start to break down with this insulin resistance? Type 2 diabetes, which is insulin resistance, is the primary factor in the development of type 2 diabetes. When the body's cells do not respond effectively to insulin, blood sugar levels rise, leading to this diagnosis. Next, metabolic syndrome. Insulin resistance often coexists with other metabolic abnormalities such as high blood pressure, abnormal lipid profiles. This would be elevated triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, and high LDL. Okay, so you can actually look at your lipid panel, and if you have high LDL, high triglycerides, and low HDL, there's probably insulin resistance. That's exactly what happened to me. Okay, so I had to change. Did I need to go on a low-fat diet? No. Or did I need to go on a statin? No, because 50% of people who have heart attacks have low LDL cholesterol. So the statin industry, it's a sham, okay? And there's a lot of information out there about that. But, so what did I do? I lowered my carbohydrate intake. I increased my protein, veggies, and good fats. And you know what? All my blood markers went down. My blood pressure went down. Everything. I did have high blood pressure as well. Well, high for me, not like clinically high, but high for me. So as soon as I did that, beep, all my numbers went back normal. Okay. So, and then you also have something called central obesity. This central obesity is when you start getting fat around your organs. Okay, like on the inside, not just on the outside. Like having a dad bod just means you got a pooch. Having central obesity is like inside. All right. This cluster of conditions is known as metabolic syndrome, and yet has an increased risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. Some of the other ones: cardiovascular disease. Insulin resistance is associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, including atherosclerosis. That's always a tough one. Hardening of the arteries, basically. Coronary heart disease and heart attacks. Fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease called NAFLD, is common in individuals with insulin resistance. Over time, it can progress into severe liver conditions. All right, or even like a cirrhosis. Okay, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which PCOS, which many women struggle with. This is usually the first symptoms of that are usually insulin resistance, poor diet, poor exercise habits. And maybe some genetic predisposition. But again, that's the one thing, that's the one X factor. Whatever your genetics are, that's the X factor that you have to deal with. Nobody can necessarily give you a recommendation. You have to figure that one out for yourself a little bit. Women with insulin resistance are at higher risk of developing PCOS, a hormonal disorder that can lead to irregular menstrual cycles, infertility, and other health issues. Sleep apnea, right? You're not snoring just because you are overweight. You could be, But sleep apnea, insulin resistance is linked to an increased risk of sleep apnea, condition characterized by interrupted sleep breathing during sleep. So basic inflammation, cognitive decline. Emerging research suggests the connection between insulin resistance and an increased risk of cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is referred to as type 3 diabetes of the brain in some circles. It's referred to as that, right? So dementia could actually be insulin resistance of the brain, okay? So this is an issue. Kidney disease. Prolonged insulin resistance can damage the kidneys and increase the risk of chronic kidney disease. Other certain cancers as well, including breast cancer, colon, and pancreatic cancer. Okay, so for instance, so these are all things that happen down the road. So the first step is insulin resistance. The first step is chronic stress, lack of sleep, lack of activity, poor diet choices. Those things build up over time and start to creep into insulin resistance. Insulin resistance can start taking multiple paths throughout the body to create different issues, okay? Starts with usually with inflammation. It can inflammation can actually close off vascular. You can get vascular constriction basically. So a big first sign for guys is erectile dysfunction. You don't necessarily have too much stress at work, maybe. You actually have insulin resistance, which is why you can't get an erection. Okay, so the blue pill is great, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But so depending on your particular situation and your genetics kind of determines the path that insulin resistance will go down as things back up. As the traffic backs up, the infrastructure starts to break down. What infrastructure starts to break down in your body is usually predicted by your genetics and by your situation. Okay, so for me, it went into lipids, right? For me, I could tell in my lipid profile because my father's had a heart attack. My father was pre-diabetic. So I am genetically kind of predisposed to that avenue of problems, okay? Also, both of my grandmothers passed away with some form of dementia. I don't know if it was absolutely Alzheimer's, diagnosed Alzheimer's, but I do know neither of them remembered their kids and their family at the end, which is a terrible fate, okay? So genetically, I'm predisposed to go that direction. Therefore, I have to be careful. Okay, so I want to give you like a basic, like a story of a guy, okay? So sometimes I hate it when people do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, so sorry. So let's just take a guy named Steve, okay? Steve is a pastor at his dad's church. Fill in the blank for whatever occupation you want to choose. He is in line to become the senior pastor in a couple years. He is in his early 40s with 3 kids and a loving wife. He works a lot, loves the church, and is at every event to lead by example. He leads by example. He is sedentary for sure, but always has plans to get to the gym, tomorrow. Maybe one day is what he tells himself. He eats like the majority of us do based on his feelings, entertainment, cravings for certain foods. Everything revolves around food. He gets happy. He celebrates with food. He gets sad. He mourns with food. Every meal is about, gratifying his appetites rather than fueling his body. Unfortunately, he begins to develop some insulin resistance, okay, which is going to happen if you eat this way. The first signs are his bulging waistline and he increased snoring, right? His wife's like, my God, you started snoring. He's like, well, maybe I'm just getting older. Nope, he has sleep apnea. The next thing that develops is some erectile dysfunction, okay? He starts, he and his wife are going to be intimate and things just don't work. He didn't drink too much, which could happen. If you drink too much, you can have a performance issue for some guys. But in this case, he didn't. It just didn't work. Erectile dysfunction or insulin resistance begins with vascular constriction at the extremities. This can be a first sign. Steve goes to the doctor for his ED. He gets a blue pill, right? Problem solved. Boom. Back in business, baby, right? This helps for a bit, but only hides the underlying issue. He didn't have a problem his symptom was erectile dysfunction, but the problem was insulin resistance, right? So this is a big issue. And if you read Dr. Peter Attia's book, Outlive, which I have right here, I recommend anybody, if you want to read a book that kind of exposes the medical system that we find ourselves in and kind of foreshadows the kind of medical system we need, read this book. It's a great book. He's a thought leader in a lot of this. Sorry, I'm petting the puppy too. So, so this is only hiding, but his doctor tells him, look, this is normal for a guy your age, right? This is normal. But it is only normal when sickness is normalized. So this is the issue too. You need to be careful when your doctor tells you that your sickness is normal, because being sick is not normal. But having erectile dysfunction in a sick society is normal. So when the standards are that low, sure, it's normal. But that's not what we're looking for. For men, you don't lose the ability to procreate until like near the end, man. You could be 90 and probably still make babies. So if things are healthy, they can keep working. So it's not normal for a 40-year-old man to not be able to do what needs to be done. Okay? So I'm just going to push that out there. So Steve keeps moving forward as usual. His diet and lifestyle remain unaddressed. Unbeknownst to him, as he gets heavier and heavier, he is also losing muscle mass from the lack of activity and the lack of adequate protein intake, which increases the development of his issues connected to insulin resistance. So just so you know, 80% of the glucose or sugar in your body is stored in your muscle mass. As your muscle mass shrinks from inactivity and lack of protein intake or lack of hitting an adequate amount of protein, you basically lose storage capacity. So your house gets bigger, your closets get fuller. Okay, you get bigger, but the storage capacity gets lower. Okay, so problem gets exponentially worse. So as a couple more years go, Steve suddenly begins to lose weight without trying. Like he just starts losing weight. It's melting off of him. Sweet, finally dropping that weight, baby. He is very thirsty, and he drinks a lot of water like all day, but it never seems to really be satiated. So no big deal. Also, his cuts are not quite healing right, or as quick. He bruises a little easier, and he finds it strange, but the weight loss is great, right? Like finally, his body just figured it out, right? As he's driving to church, he stops by McDonald's to get his usual Egg McMuffin and a large soda. But today, when he gets to the order window, everything goes blurry. His eyes are blurry. His eyes won't seem to focus for a few seconds. He gets a little scared, but his eyes find a way to focus. Whoa, that's weird, he tells himself. Little does he know, he has full-blown type 2 diabetes now, and is in danger of many other medical complications. So freaking out a little bit, he goes to his eye doctor, right? Because when your eyes go blurry, you go to the eye doctor. Thankfully, his eye doctor has some sense. The eye doctor takes a look in his nice brown eyes and says, Steve, you need to see an endocrinologist, man. You need to see a real doctor. What's up? He said, you have diabetic retinopathy. You can actually see the insulin resistance, the diabetic issues inside the retina, right? So he luckily has a doctor, an ophthalmologist that is smart and pays attention. So he recommends he goes to the endocrinologist to get things checked out. Steve's a little bit freaked out. How could this even happen, man? I mean, I'm only in my 40s. I mean, no one in my family has diabetes. He goes to the endocrinologist. He has type 2 diabetes. They give him a couple meds to help control his blood sugar and some pamphlets on how to eat for type 2 diabetes. The average dietitian and endocrinologists are taught this is a genetic issue. So meds are the only real course of action. Lifelong medication prescription and a host of risks from stroke to Alzheimer's. Yay, medication. So unfortunately, all of this is actually avoidable. So because Steve is listening to the so-called experts, he just got a laundry list of medications. He got no actual advice on how to change his life. He was never told that type 2 diabetes is 100% reversible through lifestyle choices, exercise, sleep, and you know what? Taking care of your body. It's 100% reversible. Type 1? No, because you can't make an organ work that doesn't work. Type 2 is the consequences of living the way you live. So in reality, he feels like he's doomed by his genes, but he's not. He's doomed by his habits. Reality is we are all in control to a large extent of what happens in our bodies. There are very few genetic situations which are unavoidable or 100% deadly. I mean, which one is it? Hutchinson's. Like Hutchinson's disease, which is like if you have the genes for it, there's like a 80% chance that you're going to develop it. Or Huntington's, that's right. Huntington's. Sorry, I got that wrong. I'm just moving too fast. So like Huntington's is like, yes, if you have a positive test for Huntington's, chances are you're going to develop it. But there's very few situations, especially when it comes to like heart disease, obesity, anything like that, that's killing the vast majority of people who are dying in this country. There's not 100% certainty that that's going to happen to you. The only real certainty is if you don't change, something will happen, okay? So this is why insulin resistance is so important and why it starts much sooner than you get diagnosed, right? You don't get diagnosed with diabetes until you're like 6.2 on the A1C score. But what if I'm 5.9, 5.7? Well, you're insulin resistant. So you have it. But the doctor's not going to tell you you're diabetic until you hit a very specific number. The problem is there's a lot of numbers between there that could have raised a red flag and the alarm to help you understand, hey, some things are going on here. You need to make some changes. So how do we stop Steve's situation from happening to you? What do you need to do? Broad strokes right now. This is broad strokes, big rocks, okay? Everybody's a little different, but if you can take care of these things, you're well on your way to not developing insulin resistance, okay? You got to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. You got to sleep. You don't get to not sleep, okay? I don't care. Sleep when you're dead. Yeah, I hear people say that all the time. Good thing is you'll die sooner, and you will sleep. So you will sleep one way or the other, right? You're going to either sleep voluntarily or you're going to die sooner or have some type of mental breakdown or end up with some type of serious issue because the majority of the mental illnesses in the DSM and DSM-5 have sleep problems associated with them. So that's an issue, okay? Eat a sensible diet. Eat a sensible diet, probably lower carbohydrate. A lower carbohydrate focusing and prioritizing protein is probably the most sensible plan, okay? Prioritizing protein adds in keeping and creating muscle mass to create a larger reservoir. Hang on one second, sorry. Come on, puppy. Go ahead. Sorry for that little break. So, eating a sensible diet, focused on protein, focused on lower carbohydrate and lower processed foods is going to be the best option, okay? I don't care if you got people online telling you you should have you should be able to eat everything in moderation. Well, not everybody can eat everything in moderation, especially when the vast majority of stuff that's put out there is not even food. So, you should be able to take in just enough poison like everybody else. That's not necessarily sensible, okay? A sensible diet is foods that humans have been eating for the vast majority of their history, which is animal products, vegetables, things that come from the ground like potatoes, things that come off trees, avocados, fruits, other things like that. Almost all animals are edible in some form. And not eating a bunch of processed things that come from factories. If it has a commercial, you probably shouldn't be eating it. Okay? So eating sensibly. Prioritize your protein. Keep your carbohydrates relatively low. And make sure that you're eating like things that are not coming from a box. It's pretty simple. If you need a diet that you need a name of a diet, try a nutrient-dense paleo diet. Focus on that. Okay? Ketogenic diet, great diet. Okay? Don't let the names trigger you into tripping out and like now all of a sudden you need to go deep dive into the internet wormhole around keto. A low carbohydrate diet's a great diet. Focus on protein, you'll do great. Exercise and resistance training are a non-negotiable, because you are going to always eat. You're going to eat. That's just what's going to happen, right? But if you're not exercising, you're storing. Okay, if you're not exercising, you're not using the resources you can keep to take in. You're always going to eat a bit more than you need, right? You need a certain amount of calories just to stay alive, right? But we always eat above that. We're driven to eat above that because of activity levels. We walk around, whatever. But like for me, if I need like what I need to live is probably like 1,800 calories, 2,000 calories. I eat well above that, right? Just to stay full. So if you're not exercising and resistance training, you're storing all that. And then if you're not using any of it, so then you're developing, insulin resistance. So we have to be careful here, okay? These activities use up stores of glucose in the muscle, allowing room for more storage. So you get a clearing effect and a restoring effect. So you get this cycle. You don't want things just to get stored and then stay there, right? And now you're a hoarder and you just got crap everywhere, right? You're just storing body fat and you're just getting fatter and sicker and you're wondering what's going on. Well, get your behind outside and go exercise. Like, what the heck? You don't exercise because you have to. One, you exercise because you can. And then you exercise because your body needs it. And then the other reason you exercise is because you're being a good steward of what God gave you. Otherwise, you're being irresponsible. You're being irresponsible if you knowingly choose to be sick because you're either afraid or you procrastinate or you're lazy or you're not sure what to do, but you're knowingly choosing free medicine. Peter Attia said in his book, Outlive, which I referenced earlier, that exercise is the most powerful longevity drug that we have. It is. And there seems to be no upper limit to how effective it can be. All right? So get outside, move, go. The human body is meant to move. Go for it. Side note, everyone is different. We're all different situations and contexts. So my journey will look different than yours, but that doesn't relieve any of us from doing what must be done. Some folks' genetics make it easier to gain weight and start with less insulin sensitivity. So some people's genetics make this process more difficult. Some people's genetics make this process easier. But neither of those acts as an excuse for us to do nothing about it. Okay? So here is a recipe for nearly guaranteeing your insulin resistance. I'm going to give you a recipe for it, and then we're going to close. Manage your stress, manage your life as if you were still a teenager. That's what you should do. Undersleep regularly and use caffeine to function most days. When you go to bed on time, stay on your phone to slow the release of melatonin, with the brightness up and just keep scrolling. This will ensure it takes longer for you to get into restorative sleep. Number 2, eat whatever appeals to you in the moment. That's what food is, right? That's what food's for, right? The only consideration should be, does this make me happy? Or does this make me feel better about myself or my situation? Am I sad right now? Well, I should fix that with donuts. So whenever you eat things, the only consideration should be entertainment and using it as a form of medication. Okay, that's what you should do. Using food as a coping mechanism for your feelings. If it is healthy or doesn't taste awesome to you, you should avoid it. Right? And then you should make jokes about how people who eat healthy are still going to die. And then you should make jokes about how when people eat organic, they're just going to die with a bad taste in their mouth. You should say those jokes to make yourself feel better about the fact that you're still eating like a teenager. I'm sorry, I know I'm being a little rough here, but I'm very passionate about this because I really hate seeing people throw their life away because they're just afraid or they're too lazy to do what needs to be done. Or they're busy making excuses. Everybody's afraid, man. Everybody's scared. Everybody doesn't want to. Everybody has things they're afraid of and they don't want to work on. But none of us gets a free pass on it. Okay. Avoid physical activity. Number 3, avoid physical activities of all kinds. Seek comfort in every decision. Elevators, closest parking spot, sitting at work, sitting in the car, sitting on the couch. Discomfort is your enemy. This is a great way to ensure you get insulin resistance. Okay? I know it sounds snarky and silly, but this is how the majority of people live and are still surprised when things go wrong. Neglecting your health is the most common reason for developing these situations. There are others, but they're not nearly as numerous. Okay? Look, we love you here. We want you to thrive. We want you to live. You know what? You're going to have to embrace some discomfort. The body requires discomfort to thrive. Struggle is needed. And you know what? You're going to have to take responsibility for what you eat. You're going to have to take responsibility for how you move, how you sleep, and how you live. And I promise you, I really do think that some of us are dying early because we neglect ourselves. And I believe God might question us about it. I believe God might question you or question me about why are you standing here prematurely? You're standing here prematurely. I wasn't planning on you being here in front of me for another 15 years. You're here early. Why? I had things for you to do. I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. You did everything you could, and you were faithful in everything you could do. And I know that might sound strong. I'm sorry, but I don't apologize sincerely about it because some of us need to get our lives straight so that we can do what God called us to do. All right. Well, look, that's all I have for today. I do love you. I appreciate you. I don't want you to develop any of these situations. So let me encourage you. Take responsibility for your actions. Take responsibility for your body. God placed a call on your life. He has great things for you to do, but you have to cooperate by doing what needs to be done on your end. Okay? So go change the world, but first change your own life. Okay? We love you. We're praying for you. We believe in you. We believe God's best for your life, and we hope the best for you and your family. Okay? Have a great day.